Hi, everybody. I hope you've enjoyed part number 1 of our discussion with Andy and Anil of Bango. Stay tuned. Part number 2 of that discussion is coming up right now. Well, moving on, as we learn a bit more about your sort of journey into Japan, from your perspective, you obviously got Andy on board at the right opportunity for all of you to do that. And I guess that was a key turning point in moving things forward in Japan. Are there any particular kind of milestones in your journey that you could share with us that may be relevant or interesting that sort of helped you along the way?
Andy, do you want to talk about Amazon, the Amazon experience? I'll just prefix it by saying that having spent a lot of time working in Japan, the good news was even before Andy joined Bango, because we worked together, whenever Ray and I visited Japan, we'd meet with Andy socially and we talk about business. So we kept that relationship going. And then in about 2014, 2015, we signed an agreement with Amazon to provide this billing method I was describing at the beginning of using your mobile phone to quickly pay for things online. And we signed that agreement, and then that then really after a year or two into an intense Japanese focus. But I'll hand over to Andy at this point.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. So we started the so-called carrier billing, which is the things that end user buy on Amazon can be charged to the mobile phone bill, which is called the carrier billing. We started the service in 2017. As Anil said, that they signed the contract in the 2015. Then one of the reasons why Amazon selected the Bango is because the Bango is a global company. So we work with the global players. So from Amazon perspective, if they connect with the Bango, then Amazon can take the Bango technologies or to the other market, non-Japanese market, and can connect to the many carriers around the world. And also we have in Japan, there are the 3 big carriers. NTT Docomo and KDDI and SoftBank. Then once they connect to the Bango, then we can take care of a whole 3 other carrier, maybe 4th carrier in the future. So it makes Amazon's job to deploy the technology in Japan will be much easier through Bango. From the carrier's perspective, because we have a lot of experience with working with Amazon, so we make the carrier's job much easier. We find that we have a very complex technologies on the platform, but that's our value.
Got it.
That's the then running the Amazon services for 5 years now, to 6 years now. Then that's the establish our credibility. Then eventually, in the last August of the last year, we acquired the NTT Docomo's payment subsidiary because we established and we proved that we can do the smart job in Japan.
So this was Bango acquiring an entity or a business unit or a part of a subsidiary of a big Japanese corporate. That's basically what you guys did. Wow. Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing.
And that is a unusual example, but nonetheless an example that is consistent with what we've been talking about on this podcast, which is building that relationship really diligently over the long term, enjoying working together, forming personal relationships, doing good business. So when it came to a point unknown to us, the NTT Docomo, enormous company with enormous interests in Japanese market and global markets, said to itself, how do we move our payments business to the next level? One of their thoughts was, well, if we spun it out to another company that has the benefits of being independent, not owned by us, it might be the case that actually they can do more quickly with more partners than we can do. And because we built that credibility and those relationships, we were a logical company for them to come to and say, look, this is what we're thinking of.
Wow, that's amazing. And again, such a great example of how to approach the Japanese market and how to build those relationships, because that situation would never have arisen if you hadn't have done all the right things for building the relationship and the partnership in the right way. So
it's quite different actually from the sort of beauty parade concept that often is how Western companies sell their businesses or subsidiaries, where they basically say, here are the characteristics of an acquirer, and let's go out and talk to everybody that could possibly be interested. What happened in this particular case, and I think Andy can comment more, it's common, this approach in Japan was, who do we like working with? Where are our existing partnerships that we find productive and rewarding? We don't need to do a beauty parade.
Yeah, that's again such a good example. I mean, Andy, from your perspective, how did you sort of view that experience? I mean, is there anything else you can share from a Japanese perspective on that situation that you built to get to that point where those discussions happened?
I think one of the key point is we demonstrated to the partner, which is NTT Docomo, the Bango is very capable to adapt to their culture. So one of the key points they said is they like the Bango culture, and they believe the Bango culture will fit with the Japanese culture. So that's quite important alongside with the long-term commitment, because at the end of the day, it's a human and human work together. Unless it's together, then it's never be successful.
So, of course. Yeah. And I just wanted to ask you both a little bit on this point. And you know, we haven't got time to drill into fine detail, and I don't obviously want to get into any sensitive confidential kind of issues with your relationship there. But just from a general perspective, when it got to the point of both sides coming together and you got down to the nitty-gritty of thinking there is some sort of commercial deal that we're going to do here. In your case, it was an acquisition of part of their business. When you got to that point, did it then become a very complex thing that you had to work through to make that happen? Was it sort of hard work in getting into all the detail, or was it relatively straightforward? I'm just trying to think of a deal of that nature, how complex that may or may not have been. Any sort of headline thoughts you can share on that?
I would say it wasn't particularly complex, but it was hard work. So there wasn't anything structurally unusual or weird about the deal. But you do, and this is again a really good tip for Western companies, you do have to be prepared to roll your sleeves up and get into the detail with the Japanese company. So I've done more M&A type deals with American companies than I've done with Japanese companies. And with American companies, a lot of it is, pace and speed are really important to get it done now. You need to get comfortable. You need to have enough grip of the business. But really, the motivation for an acquisition of an American company, an M&A of any kind, is it looks like it fits with what we want to do in the future. It looks like a good team, and the product appears to do what it thinks it does. Okay, let's get the deal closed, done, and then you get the deal closed. And I think the Western culture, and you see it particularly in America, if there are problems, we'll sort them out later. Just get the deal done.
Mm-hmm.
When you're dealing with Japanese companies, they don't necessarily expect there to be no problems. They're not naive at all, of course, and they're very experienced, but they want to know what they are exactly. And so you do have to really be prepared to roll your sleeves up in terms of detail. I'll give you another anecdote as well, in case any listeners are about to enter negotiation. Negotiations, meeting style is different. So fundamentally, the reason why a British company might meet a British company or an American company might meet an American company is we're trying to progress a negotiation. We're stuck on some points. Let's meet and let's figure the points out and agree how we're going to proceed. When you negotiate with a Japanese company, you do a meeting, you probably won't decide anything at the meeting. It'll just be a prolonged information gathering exercise. And your Japanese counterpartners will say, can you explain a bit more about that? Can you tell us a bit more about that? Could you send us a document that shows us how this works? And you'll finish the meeting, and they'll be prepared to have some stamina, because Japanese stamina. And you'll think, did we decide anything? The answer is no, nothing was decided. But they'll then have the information they need to go away and make decisions they have to make. So there's a different style, different kind of way of software.
Yeah, so I guess it's a little bit about being patient. It's a little bit about being prepared to give lots of information, probably what some companies would consider to be minute detail, but we have to be prepared to provide all the information that's required to enable the decision making on the other side. And yeah, not expecting that kind of immediate reaction or some sense of a decision being made. It's about being patient and letting the process take its course, I guess.
Yes, that's quite the key point to make deal successful, because my case is I worked for the Japanese companies for quite many years. Then the experience of acquisition. Now, but I have both the experience of acquiring the Japanese companies and also selling it, and also acquiring American companies too. So this case, I can understand the both side of the Japanese side and the UK side of the stuff. So I could manage the communication bridge between the both, because I understand both. That's, I think, provides the value, understanding the both sides. And
I can
also the other end too.
Yeah, that I can totally see that and totally appreciate that. And that really brings me on to the next question I wanted to ask. And I'm going to aim this one a little bit at you, Anil, initially, because a little earlier I asked Andy the question about, through the Japanese eyes, what would be the things going through his mind when he looks at a Western company coming into the Japanese market. From your perspective, the story's been very clear that you and Andy have this long-term relationship going back many years and through previous companies and things. So a lot of trust and understanding has been built there over many years. But when, and I guess, when you got to the right point at Bango, whatever it was, whatever the timing was, when you were ready to have somebody on the ground in Japan, then obviously you reached out and convinced Andy to come on board and join you. But what would you say, Anil, for other companies following along behind you? And this is a question we get a lot at Export to Japan. Companies come to us and ask and say, when is the right time to hire someone in Japan? Should I work with an agent locally first and try and build up the business? Should I get to a point where I've got some customer relationships and got revenue coming before I hire someone? You made some great points yourself earlier about showing commitment to the market. So sometimes having a local presence and somebody on the ground is a way of showing that you're serious about the market. So from your perspective, Anil, what difference did it make when you had somebody on the ground, once you hired Andy and you had your person on the ground? Any thoughts and wisdoms you can share on that for our listeners?
I think it's vital. I think it's very, very hard to serve the Japanese market without having somebody that you've got a good relationship with on the ground. We discussed already that it's an early indicator to prospective Japanese customers and partners that you're serious, that you've hired somebody on the ground. But secondly, and really obviously, but it's still worth saying, is you won't pick up all the nuances of what's going on in the market. But also, we just talked about meetings. We talked about meetings in the context of an M&A negotiation, but even normal meetings in the context of a product pitch, product presentation, and potentially a commercial negotiation. There will be nuances, linguistic phrases, body language, all those things that you won't fully understand unless you have a Japanese person there observing and participating in what's going on. And one of the things that we've often had, I talked about this, a sort of slightly strange idea of going to a meeting, exchanging a lot of information and feeling like nothing had been decided. Andy would often call us back within an hour or certainly a day and say, on the way out of the meeting, they said this. And it was in some senses the most substantive thing that had been said during that whole period. The 5 minutes after the 3-hour meeting was more informative than the 3-hour meeting in terms of what they were thinking and where their minds were going. So without that presence, it's impossible to pick those things up and impossible. One of the frustrations, and we had a very positive conversation so far about relationships with Japan. One of the frustrations with Japan is that they won't clearly turn you down if they're not interested. They won't clearly say no. So a British prospective buyer at some point will, perhaps in a very British way, let you know that we're probably not going to be doing business together right now. Thank you very much. You don't get that kind of clear cut, thank you, not for us. with a Japanese company. Andy could probably jump in here and comment on culturally why that's the case. And therefore, having somebody on the ground that can give you that judgment is important, because you won't get it in, for want of a better phrase, plain English, like you would do here in America.
Well, the quite often from English speakers' perspective, they have a loss in translation and kind of stuff. So at the local, the Japanese, I mostly understand if the partners are saying yes or no, but because they don't expressly at the show, the black and white. So sometimes it's confuses the Western people. But I can understand, so I can feel the gap between those.
Got it. I think there is a little expression that I came across several years ago that sort of sums this up, and it's something like hearing the unspoken word, or something like that, isn't it? That sort of describes this. It's not necessarily a spoken word, but you have to be tuned in to hear it and understand it and feel it without. But this is such a good point, and I've been right there. I know exactly what you're talking about when you go in those meetings and you don't get a no, but you're still a bit unsure about, well, what does that mean? Is there a yes or no? And one little point I wanted to ask you, Andy, on this is this something that is a little more unique when Japanese companies are, Japanese companies are interacting with foreign companies? Or do you have exactly the same thing when you're just dealing Japanese to Japanese in a business proposition? Is it just a cultural thing that goes across the board, or is it something a little bit unique when they're dealing with foreign companies?
Well, in general, my view is it's a cultural thing. Mm-hmm. So I see the same thing in the Japanese company.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if the Japanese, they both understand the culture. So the problem usually doesn't happen because the people understand what's the other side of the thinking or want.
Yeah, good. All right, very, very good. Very interesting. Okay, I'm a little aware of the time, so we probably need to. There's just so much we could keep going on and on and on and talking about. So many fascinating insights that we're sharing here. But just as we sort of come towards the conclusion, I just want to really ask you both about any other little tips and thoughts that you wanted to share. I mean, we've pulled out so much wisdom from this conversation, and I really appreciate everything. And as far as I can see it, we've maybe covered all the main points that people need to think about. But just if there's anything else that you think from both of your experiences, and maybe Anil, if we go with you first, is there anything from your perspective, any other great little wisdoms or nuggets that you could share along the way?
Yeah, I think very hard about your reasons for wanting to do business in Japan, the timing, your preparedness, your readiness for doing business in Japan. You touched on this earlier on, actually. You're in a much stronger position if you've got customers and you've got revenue. If you've just got a PowerPoint presentation, you'll get meetings and there'll be interest, but there'll be relatively little engagement until you can show traction. That's quite important in Japan. So thinking about it really hard, discussing with people, contact people like yourselves. I mean, you've accumulated a lot of experience, and you can put people in touch with companies like us to get a second opinion. So get a second opinion on timing and right. You want to get it right. You want to get your timing right. We've talked about being prepared to invest your time and energy and attention without getting any immediate, clear-cut, obvious return. That will be appreciated. It doesn't go unnoticed. And we talked about the importance of consistency. I think, just repeating that again is really important. If there's one fundamental principle at the heart of this, it is that Japanese companies build relationships based on trust and expect long-term relationships. Think about what that means, what that entails, and make sure you're ready to do that. And of course, the final comment I made is one that you just talked about, which is if you're lucky enough to find an Andy Suzuki, that's going to help you enormously in your Japanese ventures.
Agreed completely. That's such a good point. And yeah, I can certainly vouch for that too. I with my various business interests in Japan, I've got my equivalent of an Andy Suzuki, who is my long-term relationship, and I would vouch for the absolute value in that too. So really well summarized there, Anil. How about Andy, from your perspective, is there anything else you would like to add?
The next emphasizes the think global, but just for the local with balance, that's the absolutely key point, I think. But other than that, is the Japanese company most likely the Japanese company expect the Western partner to be the gateway to the global. So one of the key things, the important things, is we Western company to keep feeding the information, what's going on in the globally. So then the technology is a global basis. The Western company keep update with the global the world the standard. They always provide a leading edge in the global basis. So otherwise, the Japanese partner are left out with a outdated technology. That's they hate, right? So we need to make sure the Western company needs to make sure that they can be the gateway for the Japanese partner. Then that makes the Japanese partner happy.
Gotcha. Yeah, really.
Because add one thing there, Andy, which Andy's reminds me, I think it's a really good point, is we talked about human nature a lot when we discussed how to build relationships, but actually one of the facets of human nature is people do inevitably stereotype other people. And so we talked about some of the stereotypical characteristics of Japanese, so that this is Japanese, and thankfully Andy's been here to corroborate that actually there's a basis in fact for lots of those stereotypes. The good news I think for the Japanese view of the UK is the Japanese see British companies stereotypically as innovative. You know, they're imaginative, creative, innovative companies, willing to take a little bit of a risk to try and see something successful. And so as a British company, you've already got some kind of kudos because you're a British company, because the expectation is that you've probably got some kind of, crazy, original, creative thinking behind your product or business. And they will be inherently interested because of that fact. So make sure when you're entering your business, you show the difference and the uniqueness and the innovation that you've got. Because it's part of brand.
Yeah, points so well made, and a great point to sort of bring a conclusion to this discussion. And I would just say, from my perspective, we've learned a huge amount from both of you. So thank you so much for giving up your valuable time today and being prepared to share so much about your journey. There is just so many golden nuggets there and snippets of great advice for other companies to think about. So we will certainly be using the content of this discussion to help other companies, follow the path that you guys have led. And I think in summary, I just want to add an additional point to both of you, which is what you have done with your company is hugely impressive. And to get to that level of that sort of acquisition that you've done, that sort of reverse way of acquiring an element of a big Japanese organization, and for them to be prepared to partner with you in such a deep, meaningful way to do that is an incredible achievement. And the point I want to make within all of that, with what both of you guys have done and all of your colleagues in your organization, I love the way that you're incredibly humble about it too. And I think that is for me, that's another key ingredient actually about being successful in Japan and building the relationships, is to be very humble in what you've achieved. And you guys are both a great example of that, because it's fantastic what you've achieved in the Japanese market. And thank you for sharing all the wisdoms of actually how you've gone about doing it. That's really come across strongly in this discussion. So I appreciate it. Thank you both. Yeah, thank you. Thank you both for your time. It's been really valuable. It's been a great discussion. I'll just say to all of our viewers, whether you're listening in or watching this on whatever platform you watch it on, I hope that's been a valuable discussion. I think if you haven't gone away with a bunch of wonderful notes and pointers about how to do Japanese business, then I don't know what more we can do to help you with that, because we've learned a lot from these two wonderful guests. So feel free to reach out to us at Export to Japan if you've got any more questions. You've heard these two gentlemen here and all the experience they've got, so I'm sure they won't mind if anyone wants to ping them any questions. Look these guys up and reach out to them, or send your questions to us so we can forward them on. There's a lot of wisdom these guys have got that they can share. So I hope it's been enjoyable. Thank you all for listening in, and thank you once again to our great guests, Anil and Andy. Thank you so much for your time today. It's been really great hearing about your journey, and I wish you ongoing success in the Japanese market and globally. Thank you.
Thank you.